You mentioned this freedom that
I
you
did
found
play a
there.
lot of free jazz on the violin. Violin is not conducive to traditional jazz. I think it sounds pretty terrible playing bebop, but it's extremely conducive to a more free improv situation. There's musicians like Avend Kang or there's Malcolm Goldstein, I think his name is. There's a lot of great people who have used, Ornette Coleman, who have used the violin because it has so much white noise and So I did a lot of that. My friend Shahzada Smiley, who plays with me, our friendship really developed through getting together to play free improvised music, and I was doing that a lot in New York.
What attracted you to this improvisation?
Well, it's kind of the same thing as traditional Irish tunes. Because with traditional fiddle tunes, whether it's Irish, old-time American, Swedish, whatever, it's a form and the material, you don't write anything. The tunes are all there already. And you can walk into a bar in the middle of nowhere, in the mountains of wherever, and if there's people who play the same style as you, who you've never met before, you sit down, you can play music with them for like 6 hours.
Right.
And it's a way of communing, and you get to know them through their music, the way they play, how they respond, what kind of tunes they know. Free jazz is the same. You can walk into a room with somebody, and you can have like a free improv setting where they meet each other, and they communicate through music. And so in a weird way, it was actually very similar. You're not worried about, it's not this whole thing of like a singer-songwriter who has to write their own material and perform it. There's no discussion of material, it's just play.
So I assume then this is why also you've chosen not to write that much of your own, but to reimagine existing songs.
Yes, the folk songs have become a great platform for writing music. 'Cause basically with my songs, if you think of there's in pop songwriting, there's often like the top line and the track. Like there's the person who writes the track, like on an R&B song,
right.
and there's the top line who writes the melody and the lyrics. So basically, in my music, the top line is the folk song, and the track is mine, and it works very similar to that world. Often, I think, where the track kind of comes first, like my guitar part, and all the musical context comes first, and then I'll sing something later on top. And the songs have just become, they're great stories and they're great melodies, and they become a way for these musicians that I love for us to play together.
How then do you decide what to take from where and how to
the way I decide which folk songs is that I don't know very many. I'm not an expert. I don't know, I know like 1,000 Irish tunes. I probably know even in my ear a couple hundred jazz bebop bebop heads, but I don't know that many folk songs. I've listened to folk singers. They're not really folk singers. I've listened to different people from different corners of the tradition, like Bessie Jones, who did these children's singing games, Doc Boggs, who played the banjo, Almeda Riddle, who did unaccompanied singing. And they're my favorite musicians in the same way that Mark Ribot or Miles Davis are my favorite musicians. I just listen to them more for their singing and their interpretation. But eventually I hear some of their songs, and a couple of the songs might get caught in your ear, because for a certain reason, maybe the words speak to you or the melody speaks to you.
Do you remember what it was that spoke to you for Lilio?
The album or the song?
The song.
Oh, it's just, Lilio is just an epic ballad, it's just such a crazy story. I love the long stories.
Okay. And in a bigger sense, and with the album, was it the starting point of the album?
No, actually, it was kind of an afterthought. It was not one of the songs that I thought would work, because it's such a long ballad. I didn't think there was going to be a way for us to make it work, and I was more excited about a lot of the other pieces. But once we started working on it in the studio, it really came together.
Is that a big thing beforehand when you think, well, I want to do this song and I have this idea for it? And
no, I'm not very good at doing that.
Okay.
There's people who are, like Thomas Bartlett, who I mentioned. He can really think of what he wants to hear, and then he tries to get it to happen, and he succeeds. And in my case, I don't have the ability to do that, so I rely on people like Shahzada Smiley, Chris Vadalaro, Nico Muley, these different musicians. I come up with the song really strongly first. I come in with my music, with my song, which has the folk song elements in it. But then it's very open what happens then.
What then made Lilio the title track? Well, why the album name?
I needed a title for the album, and it just had a nice sound. It has a sweet sound. It's a sweet sound, but it refers to a very dark, violent and sad song. So I like that. That's a good mixture of things. It's like sweet and sour. You can get that at a restaurant, sweet and sour, the sauce. And it had the element of the sweet and sour sauce. that you could find at a Chinese restaurant in America. And the combination of those elements were very strong for me as the album title. And the album cover also has those same mixture of elements, because there's children playing in the woods, but there's also some soldiers in the corner of the picture.
And if you go back, then do you remember what was the starting point of the record?
Well, I just had a lot of different ideas of material, and in effect I cut it down. So I had a bunch of songs, but I had other ideas too, and we went in the studio very open-minded, but then once we got in there it became very clear which songs felt good to play. And
I believe you recorded in Iceland, and only 4 days it took. So what was the approach when you went in there?
Well, we had 6 days.
Oh, 6 days, okay.
But we only ended up using 4. So we could have done longer, but it was an album that ended up feeling really good to not have to overdub. Everything really happened in a very, even though they were doing electronics and different things, it just like things came together in a very in the moment kind of way. And it was fun. Iceland is a beautiful place.
Was it the first time that you recorded in that way?
No, it's my 3rd album that I made in Iceland.
Not recording in that fashion?
Oh yeah, it is definitely. The previous albums have always had elements that are done live, but there's lots of sculpting and adding after, not lots, but bits here and there. And the last one was close to that, but this one was fully that live quality.
What is it then about this live quality that you wanted to capture?
You know what? Nothing. I didn't really care about it being live or having a live. It doesn't really even sound like a live album, because there's so much stuff that's happening. Chris is playing electronics live. Bill is playing loops. So they're doing production in the moment. I think what happened is that it wasn't really intended to be like, I mean, the thing about playing live on some level is these musicians who are great improvisers can interact with each other in the moment, and you can hear that happening. So that's good. But it's also the case that they were doing so much that it was just like the production was happening in the moment. There was no need for production afterwards.
And well, finally, my time is almost up. You mentioned him already, Bill Frisell. He was a new addition this time around. Well,
yes.
Why this choice?
Bill Frisell is one of the world's great musicians. He's a master musician. He's also a very creative and curious person still. And he's been one of my big heroes since I was a kid, since I was a teenager. Okay. And one of my great dreams in life was to play with him. And that came true about 5 years ago. We became friends through various circumstances. And I ended up getting to play with him. We played songs, and he kind of wrote me letters that he was liking my music, and we got together and played. So that was amazing. And I got to this time, by the time he came to Iceland, he'd become a good friend, and so he was just a collaborator the same as Shahzad and Chris. It was very equal of all 4 of us working together. But he's still my hero at the same time. And he just has a way of dealing with music where it's just, he's very structural. He really gets deep into the structure of the music, and yet then he plays all this expansive, beautiful stuff.
Is it difficult then to work with someone you revere in a way?
It would have been at first, but because he's such a generous, curious person, and because we waited until we were friends to make this record, so that at that point we had total comfort, and I could give feedback, or if so no, it felt really good. And he was so excited to play with Shahzad and Chris. He'd never played with them before, and he really got into, like, there was a real thing happening in the room. So coming from him as much as us.
Okay, finally, the last question. This is kind of a mean question, but do you have a song on the album that sticks out for you, that means something a little bit more than the rest, or that?
Yes, the song Your Lone Journey on the album. It's composed by Rosalie Watson. It's one of the songs in the album that I changed around not very much. Like there's other songs in the record where I wrote all the music and it's just the words left, or some version of that. Your Lone Journey I did fairly straight ahead. I changed a couple chords, but it's just a very deep song, and it means a lot to me. It's a song for farewell to a close person who's passed away recently, and it's very it's a very beautiful song and brings me a lot of comfort.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Cheers.